Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Keane, best-selling author of the book, The Fitness Mindset and Rewire Your Mindset, here to help you by deconstructing expert guests on all things health, fitness, and mindset. Today's guest is Dr. Udo Erasmus. Udo is the co-founder of Udo's Choice Supplements. And today's conversation, we focus on why the right fat can help you lose weight, boost energy levels, and improve your health. In today's episode, we talk about Udo's backstory and what led him down the path to creating flaxseed oil and changing up his lifestyle, changing up his diet after being poisoned by pesticides in 1980. We talk about the major misconceptions around fat, so from the past and currently in 2021. So we break down a lot of misconceptions when it comes to the fat will make me fat and some other unhelpful belief systems when it comes to basic nutrition. We talk about the fats that heal you and the fats that kill you. So your degenerative disease from trans fatty acids, processed hydrogenated oils, and what you can do with your nutrition so that you can optimize your health, your energy levels, and help you lose weight by staying satiated and minimizing cravings with a high fat diet. We talk about the carb versus fat debate and why there's only one clear winner when it comes to weight loss, and the ketogenic diet, what can be useful and a potential approach for some people who want to go with a dietary ketosis approach to losing weight so that you're not really feeling that hungry, and who that might potentially be for. We also talk about the benefit of high fat diets for endurance and strength athletes, and the biggest lie we've been told about nutrition when it comes to Udo's expertise. Today's episode is a heavy nutrition podcast, talking about fats, talking about carbs, talking about weight loss, energy levels, satiation around food, and some interesting topics covered towards the end of the podcast when it comes to raw food and Udo's personal approach when it comes to his nutrition. So stay tuned for that for sure. But without further ado, here is today's podcast episode, Dr. Udo Erasmus, on why the right fat can help you lose weight, boost energy levels, and improve your health. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today with my guest, Dr. Udo Erasmus. Udo is the co-founder of Udo's Choice Supplements. After being poisoned by pesticides in 1980, Udo turned his passion and attention to health. He obsessively studied literature, created a method for making good oils with health in mind, developed the first ever flaxseed oil, authored several books on the effects of oil on health, fat and oils, fat that heals, fat that kill, choosing the right fats, omega-3 Cuisine, and enthusiastically educated the public in about 40 countries on the effects of oils on health and disease. Over the past 15 years, he has shared the stage with luminaries like Tony Robbins on oils and Deepak Chopra on peace, keynoted an international brain health conference, and lectured in conferences on 5 continents. I'm looking forward to talking all things fat, health, and life in general in today's episode. Udo, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, glad to be on, Brian.
I am really looking forward to this chat. My listeners will be very familiar with your products because I mention the Super 8 Probiotic Gold all the time. I mention the flaxseed oils, but we're looking forward to, and I'm looking forward particularly to diving into you and more about your backstory. Can you tell us, before we dive into kind of healthy fats and a lot of different topics we're going to cover today, but tell us a little bit about your backstory and what got you into the world of health and fitness, because you have a fascinating story. I'd like you to tell my audience a little bit about it.
Yeah, there's a saying that if you want to accomplish good things, start with a disaster.
So true.
My first disaster was that I was born during the Second World War. So I was 2.5 when we were fleeing in horse-drawn hay wagons, mothers with young children, from communist tanks and trucks on dirt roads that had no military presence. And the Allies, the good guys, they were using us refugees as target practice, shooting at us from planes. And in the mess, in the chaos of that, I don't remember a lot of pictures. I just remember the feelings, which was like unsafe, chaotic, complicated, contradictory. And I became very shy out of that. And I lived in the world of books for a lot of my childhood because books were safe. You know, you can read in a book about war, but that's different from bullets flying, right? So it's safe to read about it. It's not so safe to be in it. And when I was 6 years old, I listened to adults argue, and I didn't like argument. I still don't like arguments, And I thought what they were arguing about was really trivial. And so this thought came to me, said, man, there must be a way that people can live together in harmony. And like a 6-year-old who doesn't know how complicated everything is, I said, I'm going to find out how. And that became my driver. So went into science to figure out how things work, then into biosciences, how creatures work, then into psychology, how thinking works, then into medicine, how health works, but I only learned about disease there. So I went back into biochemistry and genetics, and then eventually left because I was still not finding something I was looking for, and I didn't know exactly what it was, and ended up getting into self-knowledge, because what I really needed to know is how I work. And so that's the long back story. I started to focus on health and got into fats after I got poisoned by pesticides. I got married. We had 3 kids. My marriage broke up. I was really upset. I wanted to kill something. And I had a pesticide sprayer's license from a gardening job that I had held for a few years. And I decided to take a full-time job as a pesticide sprayer, because pesticides are only made to kill things. So that was just the right thing that I wanted to do. And after 3 years of being super careless, spraying them, I got poisoned. Predictable outcome. And then I went to a doctor and said, what do you got for pesticide poisoning? She said, nothing. And that day, it became really clear that health is my responsibility. And so I got into the journals and looked at everything about health and nutrition, disease and nutrition. And I was just searching around for everything I could find that could be helpful for my self-help, and got stuck on fats because they were really contradictory, and I couldn't stand the contradictions. So digging into the contradictions, I realized how much damage is done to oils, as they're our most sensitive nutrients. They're damaged by light, oxygen, and heat quite rapidly. They need the most care, and we give them the least care. And the thought came, I can't get healthy on oils damaged like that. We should make oils with health in mind. And I was just crazy enough to say, I'm going to do it. So I conceptualized a method for protecting oils from the time they're closed in the seed to the time they're closed in the bottle. No light, oxygen, and high temperature gets to the oil during all of that. So you end up with oils that are fresh, that are made with health in mind, that retain their health benefits, and then they give you benefits. Oils are vindictive. They treat you like you treat them. If you treat them with care, they will take care of you. And if you damage them, they will damage your health. And then we got into, and then the year after I got poisoned, omega-3s were established as essential nutrients that your body can't make, that you have to get from outside. And 99% of the population doesn't get enough of them for optimum health. Every cell needs them. So I thought, wow, there must be they're the single most widespread essential nutrient deficiency of our time. And I thought, wow, if we could make them with health in mind and bring them back into the diet of people, we could help so many people. And that lit me up like a firecracker. It was just like, I mean, it was crazy. We worked all day and drove all night. We did a road trip. It wasn't 4 guys in a van. It was 2 guys in a van, without air conditioning in the hottest months, July, August, in the U.S., and half of June and half of December, 101 days, 85 cities, 17,000 miles by road, 35 states, telling the story about oils and why oils made with health in mind are really important. Honestly, more health problems come from damaged oils than any other part of nutrition. And more health benefits come from getting oils right and made with health in mind than any other part of nutrition. Sugar comes after that. Sugar is pretty bad too, but oils, because and omega-3s, which are the most widespread nutrient deficiency, are 5 times more sensitive to damage by light, oxygen, and heat than the usual omega-6 oils. So you're talking about working with a nightmare and giving it the care it needs to unfold its benefits. And so it was so exciting. I mean, honestly, I got so inspired just by the idea, oh my God, I could do something that could help so many people. And I'm still excited about it. And this is 1988 that we did our tour through the States. I got poisoned in 1980. So I've been at it now for almost, what is that, 40 years, almost 40 years.
Yeah, nearly as long as I've been alive. It's fascinating and so grateful for it though, Udo. I think that what you've done and the products you've brought, like something I've mentioned on this podcast countless times, particularly when it comes to things like omega-3. And one of the reasons I recommend your supplements so much is because it's a case of either go with high quality or don't go with it at all, because it causes more potential damage than good. I'm very curious because there's still a little bit of a misconception out there, and thankfully a lot of people listening to this podcast for a long time will know that there's a big difference between healthy fats, between good fats, bad fats, etc. And I do want to kind of dive into fats that heal and fats that kill, because this is something that you've covered kind of at length. But why do you think there was such a misconception around fats in general when you started on your journey first? Because as you said, you dived into the research, and there's obviously a lot to support, and we now know how good omega-3s are for us. We know how good, and there's a difference between trans fatty acids versus omega-3 and omega-6 and the balance and everything that we need. But where was that misconception coming from when you started first?
Well, I think there were two misconceptions. One is that the idea is that if you eat fat, you're going to get fat. And that has a logic to it, logic of a 4-year-old. It's like, well, yeah, that makes sense. You eat fat, and you're fat, so you must have been the fat that made you fat. But it's actually not true. Most of overweight comes from eating carbs, because when you eat more carbs than you burn, you force your body to turn the excess carbs into fats. And then you get blood sugar swings from insulin getting involved and driving the sugar into the cells and turning into fat. Then you end up with low blood sugar. Now you get cravings because your body's screaming at you, eat or die. And then you're going to eat, and then you eat carbs, and then you tend to eat them pretty fast. And by the time your blood sugar is normal again, you've eaten more than you needed, because it takes time to digest and absorb them. So you've just started the next cycle of high blood sugar, insulin. Your high blood sugar is toxic. If your blood sugar goes high and you don't have a way to bring it down, you can actually die from it. So insulin is your protection mechanism, drives it into the cells, turns into fat. Now you got low blood sugar. Now you got cravings. That's called the carb addiction cycle. And some people claim that it's 8 times stronger than addiction to cocaine, because cocaine is not necessary for life, but a source of energy is. And the way we then told people to deal with it, if you want to, when you eat carbs, they turn on fat production in the body. If you eat more than you burn, they're okay if you burn them all. And your body will burn them before it'll burn your fats. So it'll turn off fat burning and turn on fat production. Fats don't do that. They don't turn on fat production. And omega-3s especially actively turn on fat burning and turn off fat production. So I call it omega-3s the fat burning fire starter. And by the way, the oil is not a supplement. It's actually food oil foundation. So we talk about a tablespoon per 50 pounds of body weight per day, but we talk about 15 milliliter tablespoons, not 20 milliliter tablespoons like you do in Ireland and England, right? So 2 to 4 tablespoons, 15 milliliter tablespoons is the usual for adults, because most adults weigh somewhere between 100 pounds and 200 pounds. So that was the one misconception: fats make you fat. The other misconception is we blamed fats for problems caused by processing. And I'll give you an example. I got to a point where it said, okay, omega-6 is essential. What does that mean? You can't make it. You got to have it. It's got to come in from outside. And if you don't get enough long enough, you die. if you bring it back into a deficient diet before you die, then all of the problems that come from not getting enough are reversed. And that's because life knows how to build a body that works, provided you take responsibility at your mouth to make sure all of the essential building blocks that the body can't make land in the body in optimum quantities so life can do its job, right? So very specific definition for essential nutrients. But then there was research that said omega-6 is essential by that definition. And omega-6 gives you cancer and kills you. I was like, what the hell? How can that be? You get something, you have to have it, so you eat it because you have to have it, and then it gives you cancer and kills you. Is that contradictory or what? And it was that contradiction that was driving me crazy, that got me to look a little deeper and to look into how oils are made. Well, you don't usually get told this, but when oils are made by industry, and this is all of the oils that are commonly available except for extra virgin olive oil, they've been treated with Drano or sodium hydroxide, a very corrosive base. Then they're treated with window washing acid or phosphoric acid, a very corrosive acid. Then they're bleached with bleaching clay, which turns them rancid, but it takes out color molecules that could attract light and shorten the shelf life. And then when they go rancid, they smell bad, so they have to be deodorized. I call it destinkerized, because rancid oils really have an unpleasant smell. And when that's done, you've got a colorless, odorless, tasteless oil. You can't tell what it came from because all the flavors of the seed or nut that they come from is gone because it's been taken out. And you have about 1% of the molecules damaged by this processing. How much is 1%? So I called the Oil Chemist Society, the umbrella organization for the industry. And I said, I want to talk to a researcher. And they put him on the line, and I said to him, so if you know that the oils are 1% damaged by the processing, why do you do it? And he said, well, part of the reason is because we can get half of the pesticides out of the oil by doing that. And I'm thinking to myself, I've been poisoned by pesticides, right? I'm thinking to myself, what do you mean? The other half of the pesticides stay in the oil? You mean you got pesticides in all of these oils? Had never occurred to me. And I said to him, well, why don't you start with organically grown seeds? And now apparently he had never thought about it. So there was a long silence at the end of the phone. And I waited. And when he came back, he was really mad. He said, I don't know what your problem is. The oil is just 1% damaged and it's 99% good. And why did you look at the good side? And if you got 99% on an exam, you'd be damn happy, wouldn't you? So I used to get 100% in genetics because I was in love with the field. So I was not impressed with this 99%. But then I thought, well, maybe I'm overreacting. It's only 1%. Yeah, maybe he's right. So then there's a saying, when in doubt, do the math. So I did the math. If you have a tablespoon of oil, 15 milliliters, 14 grams, of an oil treated the way I just described, Drano, window washing acid, bleached, and then fried before it went in the bottle, and it's 1% damaged, how many damaged molecules will you find? And I was in Ireland one time when I asked the question, and people guess. They always guess the highest number that they think of damaged molecules you'll find in that tablespoon. And this is like a 15 mil tablespoon, not a 20 mil. The highest number they guess is always more than 1 billion times lower than it actually is. So what you actually get in that tablespoon, 60 quintillion damaged molecules. It's like more than 1 million damaged molecules for every one of your body's 60 trillion cells. And you think that's not going to make a difference? These are molecules that never existed in nature. Life never made a program to break them down. So they accumulate. Most people eat 2 to 4 tablespoons. And most people fry with oils, so they probably damage to another 3 to 6 times more. And you think that after a year or 2 years or 5 or 10 or 20 or 30, you think that wouldn't cause some problems? These are molecules that don't fit into the biochemical architecture of the body, so they interfere with what's supposed to be going on in that space. And eventually it catches up with you. And the research says increase inflammation, anything you fry, whether it's starch or protein or fats, anything you fry, you will increase inflammation in the body. That's what the immune system does when it's trying to figure out what to do with these stupid molecules that it doesn't recognize and doesn't have a gun for, right? And the risk of cancer. And this is true for starches, for carbs, for proteins, and for fats, independent of each other when you overheat them, because you turn them into toxic molecules that interfere with immune function and toxic molecules that are carcinogenic, inflammation producing and carcinogenic. And inflammation is behind a whole bunch of degenerative diseases. And this is all because of the processing. Well, when I found out how many molecules there are, you know what? I can't get healthy on oils like this that got pesticides in them. I'm trying to get over pesticide poisoning. We should make oils with health in mind. And that was the deal. We should make oils with health in mind because I can't get healthy on oils like this. Then I couldn't do it because the guy I was working with had some financial issues. So I wrote the book. It took me 6 years to write it. And because I thought, you know what I've just learned, I had like a good science university education. I never learned anything about what happens by processing in any of my classes. And all the research on fats is done with oils that have been damaged by the processing. But that's never pointed out because the grants to the researchers come from the oil industry. And if they start saying, wait a minute, you're damaging the oils, then their grants are going to dry up. So they put in a good word for the oil industry and basically omit the fact of the processing damage and the damage done by frying,
I think it's so important for people to know that and to understand that, where it's coming from, where the research, where the funding is coming from. But you even mentioned there about inflammation and the degenerative disease and a lot of issues that are caused from the processing element of fats and your body not recognizing things. I've touched on this podcast in the past about trans fatty acids and all these fats that effectively kill us over the long term, but even over the short term have a negative impact on our health or even weight. And in your book, Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill, you talk about fat loss, you talk about weight loss. Udo, can you talk about how fats can support people on a weight loss or fat loss journey? Because you have a lot of people listening to this podcast who health will be definitely a priority, but body composition and fat loss and weight loss is definitely up there as well. Can you speak to how fats can support people on a weight loss or fat loss journey as well?
Yeah, the rage these days is keto diets. And keto diets, the way they're usually done, are not long-term sustainable. And the only reason why they're not long-term sustainable is because most people don't want to work with oils that require care. So they make the fats saturated or monounsaturated, but those are not essential. And they leave out the omega-3 and omega-6, both of which are the only substances from fats that you actually have to have in order to live and be healthy. So if you make a keto diet that emphasizes, any diet from fats, the emphasis should be on optimizing omega-3 and omega-6 undamaged in the right ratio, and should also be packaged in glass because plastic leaches into oils, and that gets you inflammation and raises risk of cancer too. So if a keto diet is centered on omega-3 and omega-6 in the right ratio, made with health in mind, then the keto diet becomes sustainable, because what you eat, other than the oils that you need, and that are also the highest energy molecules in your body. So for working out and fitness and sports and performance, omega-3 is the highest energy molecule. Sometimes we call it the God molecule because there's so much energy in it. And that's because of the double bonds it contains. The double bonds make them more sensitive, make them more chemically reactive, make them able to bring oxygen into the body and increase oxidation rate, which is where most of your energy comes from. And so if the keto diet optimizes the intake of both essential fatty acids and then vegetables till they're coming out of your ears, non-starchy vegetables coming out of your ears, and at the same time you lower your carbs, because they'll override the fats. So you have to do a fuel switch rather than a fuel addition. And then they give you stable energy, and you don't get the blood sugar fluctuation, and you don't get the cravings, and you feel good, and they elevate mood. And the research shows that they lift depression. They make you a little smarter because your brain works better. And your skin becomes really nice when you get omega-3 and 6 in the right ratio. So you look better and you feel better and your skin feels nicer. You know, there's a lot of things that happen that make them the preferable fuel. And if you think about evolution, you know, a person can wear 300 pounds of fat in their body. And on 300 pounds of fat, you can run about 3,000 miles. If you're 8% body fat, which is pretty lean, and you burn half of that, let's say in an endurance sport like marathon or ultra marathons, you can run 300 miles on that 4% of body fat. But you can only, when you carb load, which is how people used to be told they should do their marathons, carb load only gets you 20 miles. And then they would hit the wall, and they weren't allowed to drink sugar drinks while running 40 years ago. Now you can do that, but 40 years ago, you couldn't do that. So they would hit the wall, they'd have run out of carbs, their fat burning mechanism was turned off because it only gets turned off when it's needed. And so they would drag themselves the last 6 miles to the finish line. So we said to those guys, hey, you guys are doing it wrong. You shouldn't carb load, you should carb deplete before your long race. And not everybody believed it and tried it because it was so totally contradictory to what they'd been told. But the ones who did came back and they said, you know, that was awesome. I ran the marathon, and at the end of the marathon, I felt like I had enough energy to run another one. And the guy who set the longest distance run in 24 hours in North America, a guy by the name of Scott Jurek, he ran 152 miles in 24 hours and did it on using the oil, did it on oil. And he said that Udo's oil got him about 25% increase in stamina. What we measured it in athletes, both strength and endurance sports, by working them to exhaustion before they started the oil, and then a month after starting the oil, a tablespoon per 50 pounds of body weight per day. Their stamina on average increased 40 to 60% within a month of making that change. We changed nothing else, just the oil. 40 to 60% increase in stamina. I don't know any training program that gets you that kind of improvement in performance.
Yeah, I can speak to that as somebody that has ran through the Sahara, ran through the Arctic, runs 100-mile ultramarathons. That's how I used your oil. I was using the flax oil, and I was using the Udo's oil for alongside a high-fat diet. So a lot of almond butter, a lot of nut butters. And again, I would never train for a 100-mile or ultra endurance event in a carb state. You know, I would always make my body more metabolically flexible by going into a more fat adapted state for the reasons that you mentioned. And I also found, and I'm sure you again would preach this as someone that has worked with or seen so many athletes who have done well with the oils and done well with high fat, your injury goes down in terms of the reduced inflammation in your body. I find, and again, it's a little bit anecdotal because I haven't been lab tested for any of this, but when I train for races, marathons or ultramarathons or triathlon, when I'm in a high carb zone, my rate of injury goes up. Like, it's obviously an inflammation issue, whereas when I do it with higher fats, my inflammation is lower and I don't get injured as easily. So I think speaking to that element alongside the performance for people listening in the endurance realm is definitely definitely food for thought, pardon the pun, because I think it's a really, really useful approach. Well, you mentioned the right ratio there a few times, Udo.
Yeah.
What would you say, and I know it's obviously context dependent on the individual and goal specificity, but what would you say is a kind of a general recommendation for people when it comes to the right ratio for omega-3 to omega-6?
Yeah. I became omega-6 deficient on flax oil because it's the only oil that has so much omega-3 and so little omega-6 that if you use it exclusively, you will become omega-6 deficient. I got dry eyes, skipped heartbeats, arthritis-like pain in my finger joints, and thin, papery skin. Classic omega-6 deficiency symptoms. Fixed it by eating sunflower seeds because they have no omega-3 and a lot of omega-6. So I brought the balance back. And that's why we actually made the Udo's oil. It is twice as rich in omega-3 as omega-6. You're getting enough omega-6s, but they're made with health in mind, because that's the second issue, right? One is we got to bring in the missing omega-3s, and the second is you got to switch out the damaged omega-6s for omega-6s made with health in mind. In the blend, we do both of those things, and it's 2-to-1. More omega-3 because they're the hot ones and they're the ones most people are deficient in. If you're healthy, you can get more omega-6, up to 4 times more omega-6 than omega-3 and still be healthy. But if you start getting symptoms, then you want to go back to 2-to-1 in favor of omega-3s because they do actually, people in our strength sports study, they got you more flexibility and mobility in your joints and less pain and inflammation. And they also speeded up healing to a third to a half the time. And very consistently. And the reason why they do that is basically they increase the energy your body. I mean, healing requires energy. If there's no energy in your body, you're dead. And if you're really low energy, that accompanies diseases, you could say the disease caused low energy, or you could say low energy caused the disease. I'd be more inclined to say that the low energy caused disease, and whether that's toxic molecules or the wrong kind of foods or poisons that you're breathing in or drinking in or eating, whatever it is. When your energy goes down, your healing goes down. In fact, 98% of the atoms in your body are removed and replaced every year. So your body is a major construction site all life long, right? We don't notice it because it's so subtle. 98%. Like if I talk to you this day next year, you wouldn't even be the guy that I'm talking to. You might still have all the same crazy ideas and same personality. That's conserved while the entire body has been taken down from under you and rebuilt. And the fact that the body turns over all the time is why healing is possible. But energy is the juice that makes your liver do its job better, that makes your kidneys do their job better, that makes your heart do its job better, that makes your lungs do their job better, that makes your muscles do their job better, that makes your bones do their job better, and that makes the brain work better. 3 to 9% increase in IQ from essential fatty acids. And we are fatheads. 60% of our dry weight of the brain is fats. So very rich in essential fatty acid derivatives that your body can make if you get your foundations optimized.
You mentioned essential fatty acids there, and just energy is the juice, the terminology you used. And one of the advice or pieces of advice that I'll offer people who struggle, and we touched on this earlier, you touched on it, Udo, that you have that carbohydrate based roller coaster which a lot of people struggle with, where their energies are up and down. And even some demographics who are choosing what would be considered complex carbohydrates, good sources, sweet potato, rice, pasta, etc., can still get those energy surges up and down. But on a higher fat based diet with the oils and everything along those lines, you're going to find a lot more of a steady balance of energy. What's been your experience with that? Because I know there's a lot of people, and the testimonies to the website, and just even firsthand, I know with people I've worked with, when I've switched them to more of a higher fat diet, they will come back and tell me how stable their energy levels are. What's been your experience with that? And can you explain to people listening why it is that happens?
Well, it's funny. There are people that swear that complex carbs are the best fuel and the best food, and you should eat lentils and sweet potatoes and all of that. And you know what? I get fat on them. I don't know why. All my life, I've always had a struggle when I eat complex carbs, not sugar. I'm not a sugar junkie. When I eat complex carbohydrates, fruits, I can get fat on fruit. And that's because if I eat more than I burn, the excess has to be turned into fat. It's better than sugar. Sugar is really nasty. But I do best on seeds and nuts and vegetables, like green vegetables, but also other colors, just not the high starch vegetables. I don't know if there is a distinction. I don't know if it's because some people are more disciplined about how many carbs they eat when they eat them. What I find really what makes it easy for me is when you eat fats, they suppress appetite. So if you eat more fats than you need, your liver has to process them, and your liver will tell you to slow down. And it does that by turning off your appetite. And if you force yourself to eat more than that, then your liver might make you feel tired, heavy, or nauseous, because it's saying to you, don't give me so much to do at any one time. So we say spread out your oils, put them in foods after they come off the heat. You can put it in hot soup and steamed veggies and stuff, but not in the frying pan. And just eat what you need to eat.
I think the satiety effect, the satiation aspect, is the real take home for people there. And
right, and the stable energy. You never get the blood sugar swings because insulin doesn't have to get involved in fat burning. You're always going to still have a little bit of carbs in your green vegetables, but you're not. It's the insulin swings and the mood swings and the blood sugar swings and the cravings that make it difficult to stabilize your energy on carbs. And the best way is you cold turkey. Replace the carbs with fats, either seeds and nuts or oils, and then lots of vegetables. And that just like but I said it before, your energy storage in your body is in fat. Your body can only get you a pound of carbs, like animal starch glycogen, made from carbs when you carb load. You can only get a pound. That's only good for running 20 miles. But the fat that is normally in your body gets you. Most animals are like 2 to 3% fat, and we're like more in the 8 to 12 range normally. And there's the thought that the reason why we survived in Africa on the African steppes is because we had more fat in our bodies, so we could run not faster than the animals. They could all run faster, but we could run longer. And that the way they used to hunt them before they had guns and bazookas, right? Before that, what they would do is they would run them to death, because if the animals only got 2% fat or 3% fat and you've got 8, you have more fat storage and can therefore be more persistent than the animal can. And they would literally run them to death. That makes a lot of sense, because how else, we can't run as fast. We don't have big teeth. We don't have big claws. We're really very delicate and vulnerable creatures. And yet we dominated the world. And part of it was by being able to invent things. But there was a time when we hadn't invented them yet. And we still were able to catch the animals, run down the animals. Fat is actually our fuel source most of the time anyway, even though the industry, especially the carb industry, is always trying to get us to eat more carbs. Yeah. The food pyramid in 1979, a new food pyramid was made in the US from the McGovern report of 1979. And they put carbs on the bottom, means you eat, that's your foundation, eat the most of those. And they put fats on the top. And they said, eat the least of these. And they didn't acknowledged that the fats were a problem because of the processing damage. And people started eating like that. And in 20 years, overweight in America went from 25 to 60% of the population, and nobody questioned the concept. That's how stupid we are sometimes.
We tend to just listen to what we've been told. And I am going to come back to something similar as a segue point, but just what I was going to say across to build on your point when it comes to carbohydrate. You mentioned fats, and for everybody listening, the essential fatty acids and, that you get from fat, dietary fat, and essential amino acids are essential, meaning you need to get them from food or supplementation. There's no essential carbohydrate out there, meaning that you can live perfectly fine without it. And I think it's important for people to understand that, because, as you said, we've been potentially fed information that will promote high carbohydrate, that you need this. And I'm not anti-carb. I'm very much a case of it depends on the person, depends on the context, depends on the goals, depends on what you enjoy, depends on what you can stick to. There's lots of moving parts, I think, when it comes to nutrition, but also understand that nutrition is a science. There's no essential carbohydrate.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing in carbohydrates you can't get elsewhere. There is something in fats that you have to have that you can't get elsewhere. And carbs are therefore the least important food. I used to work with some doctors who worked in weight loss, and they had these conferences. Actually, they worked with Syndrome X, and you can look it up. Syndrome X, overweight, insulin, diabetes, blood sugar problems, and cholesterol problems. And they used to go to conference. There were about 400 doctors went there. They all among themselves knew that carbs caused the problems that they were addressing in their weight loss clinics. And nobody would say it from the podium. That's what they told me. And I said, why not? Well, because Kellogg's was one of the main supporters of the symposium, and they weren't going to badmouth the guy the guys who spent money on making those conferences possible.
Yeah, don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Exactly. So they didn't bite the hand that fed them, and so nobody would say what they all knew. And then it became, then the news on the conference left it out, and so the people who they were talking about and talking to didn't get that information from the usual channels. This is not new. I mean, this happens. Lying is a time-tested way to get a benefit without effort, so it happens in a lot of arenas, but certainly there's lots of lies in the nutrition arena if you're looking at the mainstream society that is well entrenched and makes its money from those lies. Right?
What do you think is the biggest lie that you see in 2021?
Well, yeah, there are so many. I mean, honestly, everything. Even I'll just give you one that's been around for a long time. What the doctor does is healthcare. No, it's not. It's not a healthcare system. They don't even have a definition of health, like a practical definition that you can put in practice. It's disease management, symptom suppression, crisis intervention, and life support systems, and monitoring your downhill journey into the graveyard. They do that, and they're effective in that, but none of that is health. None of the, and there's a place for that, but don't call it healthcare. It's a misrepresentation of the service that system provides. And so, and then all the drugs we throw at things, drugs suppress symptoms. There's not a single person on the planet who's suffering from a pharmaceutical drug deficiency. Why are we using them? In nature for 200,000 years, for 4.5 billion years, every creature that lived was made out of, or at least all the breathing creatures, every creature was made out of, first of all, fresh, whole, raw, organic, mostly plant-based, and was made out of solar energy, oxygen, water, and food as nature made it. That was it. That's the whole recipe for, when you mix it up right, you get a human being, right? And the genetic program that was made in that system was made in order to support the health and function of creatures only if they live in line or aligned with nature and their nature. And when you get out of line with nature or your nature, you will get some kind of illness, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, social, right? You can't live out of line with what created you, that adapted you to its nature. You can't step out of line with that and not have a consequence.
Explore that, Udo, in terms of food as nature made it. I'm very curious to hear your perspective on that, because we all have definitions of, health is a great example there. You mentioned healthcare, and I'm 100% in agreement. Drugs suppress symptoms, and it's brilliant for certain things. Like if I get into a car crash, I want Western medicine to be the thing that is helping keep me alive. But
I agree, but call it healthcare, call it disease management.
Yes, I'm 100% with you there. When it comes to overall health, I think it's the holistic, what you mentioned there. Like there's aspects of your food and your lifestyle and your sleep and your stress and all of that. But you mentioned food as nature made it. Yeah. Explore that. What does that mean in your words? Because one of the things that I've been, I won't say contending with, but definitely thinking about recently is, as you read, and you definitely know this, Udo, as somebody that consumes so much information, either through the research that you do or having done in the past in the books that you read or write yourself, when you're reading lots of different either nutritional profiles through studies on PubMed or wherever it is, or nutritional books, it gets to the point with nutrition sometimes that you feel like you can't eat anything because, some person will say vegetables are bad. Somebody else will say meat is bad. Somebody else will say fats are bad. Somebody else says carbs are bad. And then there's studies to support most things. And food as nature made it. My version of that would have always been, until recently, single ingredients, where if you look at the back of a food label, or there's no food label, broccoli, you look at it, it's broccoli, it's a single ingredient. That would have been my definition of food as nature made it. But now I've been kind of thinking about it, you had been poisoned by pesticides and different foods that have been added to pesticides. So I'm very curious, from your perspective, what does that mean, food as nature made it? What does that mean to you?
Well, instead of listening to all these so-called experts who all come to you with agendas, usually agendas that put your money in their pocket by one means or another, right? Instead, if you look at nature, have you ever seen a squirrel with a frying pan? No. Maybe you've seen a squirrel in a frying pan, but you've never seen a squirrel with a frying pan. Is there any animal or any, whether you're talking about gorillas or you're talking about weasels, have you ever seen any animal that cooks its food? No. So if you start looking at it, well, nature's mandate or life's mandate in nature for the creatures that live there, every creature that eats food, fresh, whole, like as nature made it, raw, organic, and then probably in season, local, and sun ripe, but you can also eat it unripe. So, and that's true for every creature except the scavengers who eat dead meat, half rotted stuff, but it's still raw, it's still organic, and it's still kind of whole, just not fresh anymore, right? So if you look at nature, if you just do your own observation of how it is in nature, outside of human culture, you get an idea of what life's mandate was for creatures. So that's the way I look at it. And then what did they eat? Well, if they eat meat, they ate it raw. If they eat meat, they eat it raw. If they eat plants, they eat them raw. If, they don't make tinctures, they don't make concoctions. If they have herbs that have benefits, they eat them raw, right? And the animals, even the carnivores, they will nibble on certain raw foods. So there's studies about all of that stuff, even if you don't see it yourself. But it's always from, how was it in nature before we got civilized? Because civilization was created by our mind. And the body was created by life. And so being in line with several things. Within you, there's awareness. Most of us are not that internally aware, but that's where our peace lives. And when we get to that peace, we actually discover that peace has always been everywhere, except only peace knows that. So if you can't see peace everywhere, it's because you're not looking from the peace that is the core of your that is your foundation, that is the core of your being. So that's one. Second one is life energy. We are solar energy that got absorbed by green leaves that excited electrons to form bonds between atoms that store that sunlight. Those become our food molecules. We eat the food, we break it down, that sunlight energy is released. We call that life. So solar energy and life is the same, right? It's not all of solar energy, but it's a part of solar energy. So that's life. That life, the nature of that energy is unconditional love for the body, and we are that energy. In our individual essence, we are that energy. That energy shines, and inspiration is what that looks like. So we've got awareness, life energy, inspiration. Now we got physical body. And that's, everybody knows, food and fitness, detox or avoidance of toxins, rest, digestion, fresh, whole, raw, organic, essential minerals, vitamins, amino acids, fatty acids. So that part is, we know a fair amount about, and most people who look at health look at that mostly. Then the next one is survival smarts. That's about crisis readiness, so that whenever something changes, you don't get freaked out, right? Because freaking out is not good for health unless it's really short term and you do something about it. And then next, outside is social group. We mostly try to find our belonging from the group, but what if the group is really screwed up? See? So the first belonging is to life. And the expert that we need to look at is the expert that is called life, because life is omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient in your body. Weighs nothing, runs the whole show, is actually your identity. And when you feel that, you get lit up and it feels good. And you're not, the body's always needy. Life is always giving.
I love that. And I think, Udo, just to clarify for people, because I know your program, Total Sexy Health, talks about this. It goes through the elements of, whole health, mental health, presence, awareness, life energy, everything you've talked on there. But just to clarify for people, Udo isn't saying to eat raw meat, because I'm definitely going to get a message or two after if we don't clarify. Cook your meat, eat raw, organic as much as possible.
No, wait. If the meat is uncontaminated, it's better for you raw than cooked. But it has to be uncontaminated. So sushi is raw meat. The first time I ate it, I looked at it and I said, I don't believe this. They eat dead raw fish, right? Because there are enzymes in raw foods that do 60%, sometimes 10 to 90% of the digestion of the food for you. That takes a load off your digestive system. That frees your immune system to do all the other things it needs to do. Viruses, bacteria, funguses, cancer cells, parasites, inflammatory proteins. Like the immune system takes all of that healing. The immune system does all of that. But if you don't digest your food because you destroyed the enzymes by cooking, then you need to replace them. Otherwise, you put more than double the load on your digestive system, and you then weaken your immune system by doing that. So
what would be the exceptions to that? You mentioned sushi, just for Udo, even for myself. What would be the exceptions to that rule? You've mentioned raw sushi there, obviously, as an example of not cooking it. What would be the exception, the meats particularly, that people should be very conscious of when it comes to contamination?
Well, the ones, yeah, it's hard to say now. The research is really clear. A mostly plant-based diet fresh, whole, raw, organic, mostly plant-based, is the way to the healthiest life and the longest life, and also the longest sexual life, since we're talking to reasonably young, sexually active people. Do you know that vegetarians, or if they eat properly, plant-based nutrition, that they can get it up longer than the meat eaters?
That they're definitely the studies that were interesting to research.
Talking about how virile they are. No, but this research is there.
No, I'm joking. I 100%. I know the claims, and I've read a lot of the research on it. I'm totally joking.
And the difference is, the truth comes from nature, and the things you get told that aren't true come from advertising. Why does advertising do that? It's because you can huff and puff, is what they call it legally. You can huff and puff to sell your product. It doesn't have to be true. You can't blatantly lie, but certainly you can mislead and misimage products to give the impression that this would be really good for you. If you drink Coca-Cola, you become the life of the party. No, you don't. Right? No, your teeth rot and your breath is bad.
It would sell significantly less Coke, though.
Yeah. Well, that's the point, right? And so there are people who eat raw hamburger, but it can't be from contaminated meat. Where's contaminated meat? Well, our commercial meat these days, I think they allow you 1 million E. coli in a gram of hamburger. And that then says, and when you grind it up, of course, you mix the bacteria all through the meat. Whereas if you ate the steak raw, the E. coli would only be on the outside. So the inside meat, so you'd have to cut the surface off. That's what they do in sushi. They cut the surface off, the meat inside is okay. But they don't grind their fish, right? They don't turn it into a paste. But there are people who eat raw hamburger. It's called steak tartare. And I think there are other people who eat thin slices in Italy. That's a custom. So it's not like this is not being done. In Sweden, they ferment fish, stink like hell, in barrels. They ferment them, and then they put the skin off. And if it's 40 below, they will open the front and the back door to let the stink out. And the meat, when they take the skin off, the meat tastes amazing. Fermented meat. They fermented rabbits in the north, for bury a whole rabbit for 6 weeks. It ferments, then they skin it, and then it's raw meat. So it's not like raw meat is a really bad idea. Contamination is a really bad idea. And the way we mass produce our meat is done in such a sloppy, dirty way that it requires cooking if you're going to eat it. But it'd be smarter if you didn't eat it.
I think I'm really glad we expanded on that, just so people have context, that they don't go into their local Tesco or Sainsbury's or the equivalent in the US and Australia and just grab their chicken and eat it raw.
Or walk down eating a raw steak and saying, Udo told me.
We're not doing that. Not a good time for anybody. Udo, no. I've loved this conversation. As I said, I've been so excited to have this chat since we set it up. And I know you've set up a couple of things on your side, which I'll be linking in the show notes for today's episode. But Udo, can you tell everybody, and as I said, a massive thank you for your time. I know how valuable it is, and you're doing so many things at the minute, so I'm so appreciative of it. But for everybody listening, can you tell them where's the best place for them to connect with you, where they can find out about programs, find out about what you're doing personally, the books, etc. Any links you want to give, please do that now.
Yeah, this is just to be clear, this is how I have this is my entertainment. I love doing this, and because people can benefit from it, and it feels good to be doing something that is beneficial. But where do they get in touch with me? Well, Natural Life is the distributor in Ireland. Natural Life, one word, and the products are in the natural food stores and the chemists. We also work with digestive enzymes, probiotics, and oils. Those are the three main ones. And I have a website called udoschoice.com, UDOS choice.com. And on that, we talk about the products and why we make them the way we do and what they do and all of that. And all the distributors around the world for those products are on that website. Then I have another website that is more educational. We have some courses on it that's called theudo.com, theudo.com. And I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook and I have a YouTube channel, Udo Erasmus. So I'm not hard to find. And the books, Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill, we have the only omega-3 cookbook called Omega-3 Cuisine. I didn't do that. I eat a lot of food raw. This was a celebrity chef who did the recipes. Omega-3 Cuisine, recipes for health and pleasure. Total Sexy Health is an overview of the 8 key parts designed by nature that are all different in their nature and their function, need a different kind of attention on a regular basis, go off in a different way and respond to a different kind of intervention. And if you want to live the full life, fully present in all of your being and your surroundings, you need to give each of those 8 key parts its due. That's called the book on Total Sexy Health. You can get that on Amazon.
And Udo, for everybody listening, I will link that in the show notes. One thing there, definitely, Udo, for my audience, as someone who follows your Instagram page, you put up great stuff about just life in general, about finding inner peace, about, a recent post on learning not to have an opinion on everything. I think there's great mindset stuff for people. We haven't explored it in today's podcast because we've stayed on the kind of health.
We got to do another one.
Yeah, round 2, 100%. That's my bread and butter topic as well when we go to mindset. So for round 2, let's 100% do that. Udo, I cannot thank you so much again for your time, for what you're putting out into the world, for your products, as someone that's been using them for years and has so many of my clients on them as well, because I know how reputable and how you put your life and soul into it, which I think comes across so well in this podcast. And I look forward to round 2 where we go down the mindset side.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for being an amplifier for a message.
My pleasure.
If the message is good, then the amplifier is more important than the messenger.
I'll keep it in mind. I love that. Udo, thank you so much again.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
There you have it, Dr. Udo Erasmus on why the right fat can help you lose weight, boost energy levels, and improve your health. Really interesting conversation, and looking forward to a round 2. As I said, I follow Udo's Instagram page, and he puts up a lot of mindset stuff about finding the inner peace and about kind of how to get a good balance in life when it comes to your anxiety levels and the things to avoid in modern life. So I really enjoy that. So look forward to that conversation in round 2. That is everything from today's episode. As always, if you enjoyed, be sure to take a screenshot, pop it up on your stories. You can tag me, you can tag Udo. And if this is your first time listening and you enjoyed today's episode, hit that follow or subscribe button for episodes coming every single Monday. That's everything from this week. Catch you all next Monday.